Hello, this is the last of our series of lockdown Bible studies at Walsworth Road, where we've been looking at a number of pictures of individuals finding themselves isolated, on their own, struggling in the face of adversity. We've looked at people like Elijah, Nehemiah, Jacob, David, Jesus himself. Today's passage is based on Ephesians chapter 6, beginning at verse 10. Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armour of God, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Familiar words, a familiar image. What can we learn from it that encourages us when we feel isolated, when we feel alone? Take a look at the very first verse. There are three key words in it. If you look at the original Greek, they're all about power. En dynamuste, be empowered, become strong. Krate, in the strength and power. And iskuos, powerful, strong. Each of those words has a significance. The first of them, en dynamuste, become empowered. In the time of Jesus, the philosopher Posidonius considered that dynamis, that en dynamuste, the central part of the word, the root word, the concept of dynamis, we would think of dynamic, dynamos, something that gives off a power. That root word was a fundamental, absolute, cosmic principle. It was the dominant force throughout the tangible world. It's what caused things to come into being and be alive. Dynamis was the original primeval force. So when Paul is using a word with that concept in it, he is calling upon an idea that resonates with the thinkers in Hellenistic Greek of his time. It has overtones of truly cosmic power, cosmic strength. En krate, in the power, in the might. That word krateo, the verb means to conquer. En krate is in a strength that is a winning strength, an overpowering strength. He will win. We shall overcome, if you want to think of the old hymn. Not just a power, but a power that's going to be victorious. And iskuos, that's, if you like, raw strength, the muscular power, the strength of the arm of God. Thus this little sentence at the beginning of verse 10 is picking up important themes to do with being, becoming, empowered. How does it go on with verse 11? Put on the whole armour of God, so that you can take your stand. Panoplia, the whole armour. The hoplia bit is to do with the Greek heavy infantry soldier, the hoplite. Panhoplion, all the armament. The pan part means all of it, not just bits of it, but all of it. For a hoplite soldier, the leg guards, the sword, the shield, the breastplate, the helmet. And hoplites would stand together forming a shield wall, well protected with armour, with spear and sword, ready with which to attack. Put on the whole armour. Don't be a light armed trooper. There are other kinds of auxiliary troops in the ancient world, slingers, archers and the like, more manoeuvrable, but less well armed, less well prepared. No, we are called upon to put on the complete armament that will enable you to stand firm. Why? Because it's explained in verse 12. We're not up against, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, authorities, against the powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Some commentators have tried to see within this a strict hierarchy, much as the medieval church and others created the sense of cherubim, seraphim, Nephilim and other imms, ranking angels in various ways. This isn't necessary for this passage, but Paul is emphasizing there are different powers and authorities, and they are beyond physical. They are beyond flesh and blood. They're very real to the world of the Greco-Roman civilization. How real are they to us in the 21st century? How conscious are we of the very power and influence of evil, of Satan? Is it popular to speak of the power and influence of the devil without being looked on as somewhat strange, even in Christian circles? Think about it, the influence, the significance of this passage. The rulers, the arches, that is the word like monarch, oligarch, rule by one person, rule by a few people. The arche, rulers. The authorities, that's the word exousia, and the word means somebody, something that has an automatic right, a privilege, a competence, a capacity. It is a definite power and authority, a jurisdiction, the freedom to act, the right to act, a power with the automatic right to try and do something. The word occurs on a number of occasions. We can give you two examples in the New Testament. One, in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 2, the beast appears and worships the dragon, and the dragon gives the beast authority to go and do evil works around the world. And the word that for that authority that the dragon gives the beast is exousia. On a rather more positive note, Matthew chapter 28 and verse 18, when Jesus meets his disciples for the last time. All authority in heaven and earth is given to me. And again, that word authority is exousia. That automatic, privileged power. Cosmokratoros, the powers of this dark world. The word, according to Motia, was used in Paul's time as part of the magic associated with the temple of Artemis in Ephesus, the temple of Diana as she would have been known to the Romans. In their magic chants, in their incantations, calling upon the power of the goddess, cosmokrator would have been a word that they used. So again, Paul is identifying very strongly with something of the culture of the people to whom he's speaking. This is a real thing. It's not just an imaginary thing. It's part of your lives, your culture. And it is that you are having to combat, says Paul. Those influences. So again, the choice of words here, all important. Therefore, in verse 13, he reiterates what he said in verse 11. Put on the whole armour of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you will be able to stand your ground. It's repeating the theme of verse 11. Look, though, at the word put on, analabete, in the Greek. I've made the mistake too often reading this passage of thinking of a lonely soldier standing there against all these other people. But that word analebete is plural. Everyone is to do it, and to do it and stand together. The Greek hoplites were much stronger when they stood side by side, shield to shield. Likewise in the Roman army, the Roman legionaries stood with their great curved shields side by side, fully armoured, like a wall of leather and metal. It's not a singular thing, it's not a lonely thing. And we often think of ourselves sometimes as being like this soldier, all on our own. We are not. We have others with us in the spiritual warfare that stand with us side by side in faith, in prayer, in worship. Their shields locked to ours and ours with them. The one church around the world stands in this way. And it's now that Paul goes into details about the armour in verse 14 and following. Paul is not the first person to use this image of the soldier in armour. There are certainly two passages that Paul's hearers would have been familiar with. One comes from Isaiah chapter 59, where we read this from the second half of verse 15. The Lord looked and was displeased that there was no justice. He saw that there was no one. He was appalled that there was no one to intervene. So his own arm worked salvation for him, and his own righteousness sustained him. He put on righteousness as his breastplate, and the helmet of salvation on his head. He put on the garments of vengeance, and wrapped himself in zeal, as in a cloak. The other passage comes from the Apocrypha, from the Wisdom of Solomon, and chapter 5 and verse 15, and it reads like this: The righteous shall live for evermore. Their reward also is the Lord, and the care of them is with the Most High. Therefore they shall receive a glorious kingdom and a beautiful crown from the Lord's hand. For with his right hand he shall cover them, and with his arm shall he protect them. He shall take to him his jealousy for complete armour, and make the creature his weapon for the revenge of his enemies. He shall put on righteousness as a breastplate, and true judgment instead of a helmet. He shall take holiness for an invincible shield. His severe wrath shall he sharpen for a sword, and the world shall fight with him against the unwise. So we have those passages in the background of Paul's writing. He says then in verse 14, Stand firm then. Stete, the word used in the text. And again, it is plural. It's symbolic in terms of the vision of the soldier. The Roman soldiers fought in various formations. They were well trained and disciplined in a number of different patterns. One was the wall, where the shields would be lined up, one beside the other, the soldiers standing behind them, like a solid wall of leather and wood. Another was the wedge, where they lined up in a V formation, with the front soldiers, the peak of the V, facing the enemy, so that when they advanced, they would punch into the enemy lines and break through and break the enemy line. Another, of course, was the famous tortoise, where they would group closely together with some of the shields down the side and others held up above the heads, one of the other, so that they would be protected from all sides. And groups of them could advance against the enemy, or out against enemy attacking formations, or things like enemy catapults and the like, and attack them comparatively safely. Soldiers are well drilled in this, but it meant them working together. The Greek hoplite formation, not as versatile as the Roman legionary, worked because they stood together, forming the shield wall. Let's set aside then this picture of the lonely soldier. Let's remember the spiritual battle is alongside our fellows. And you're wearing the belt of truth buckled around you. In ancient times, if you wore a belt, you were ready for work. A lot of clothing in the ancient world hung loose and long, and you needed to tuck it up and hold it tucked up so that your feet and legs were free to move without tripping when you were going to work. The belt girded you up, girding your loins, to use the ancient phrase. So if you're wearing the belt, you are ready to operate, you are ready to function. But this is a special belt, the belt of truth that gathers and holds everything together, keeps everything together. Reliability, the belt of truth. The breastplate of righteousness in place. Thoraka, the Greek word. Again, it's our word thorax. It covers the torso. But the significance of the torso, the thorax, is a bit more than just physical protection. In the ancient world, the heart, in the centre of the body, was considered to be the central point not only of the living being, if you like, but also the soul. We still talk about matters of the heart today. So the thorax, the thoraka, the breastplate, is covering the heart, covering the place where the soul is. But it is a breastplate of righteousness. Righteousness, the righteous heart. We can go on. Verse 15, your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. We know much more about footwear in the ancient world now, thanks to finds like that at Vindolanda, the fortress up in the north of England, where leather footwear of all kinds has come out of the ground. Many of the shoes being solid, thick, firm, not flimsy sandals, some with wooden soles, some of them extremely thick indeed, robust, to give you a good foundation upon which to stand. Not a shakiness underneath your feet, not an instability, but stability. The stability of the gospel of peace, an inner peace, a peace for the self, that complete and utter conviction that means that you are, whatever the storms around you, rooted in something in which you can absolutely believe and therefore be at peace, be inwardly, spiritually secure. And then you take up the great shield of faith with which you extinguish the flaming arrows of the evil one. We've spoken already about the security of that shield. The Roman shield designed to deflect some things that were fired at it, and other things that might stick in it would only penetrate some way and then be stopped, and it was tough enough so that it did not catch fire if flaming brands were thrown at it. And after the shield of faith, we read of the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit. And the emphasis here changes a bit, because we're now thinking about that same helmet that God spoke about in Isaiah 59, and we're thinking about counterattack. For the sword of the Spirit, the sword in the Roman army, was the counter-attacking weapon. They threw javelins from behind their shield wall, and then they advanced with the short Roman sword slipped out between the shields of the soldier and his colleague on either side. It was a stabbing weapon, not a slashing weapon, so you do not fling yourself open and slash left and right with it. You keep your shield in place and you stab the people directly in front of you as you advance. It's a countering weapon. The sword, the weapon to counter these other things. And pray in the Spirit on all occasions, with all kinds of prayers and requests. It is the sword of the Spirit, but there is also prayer in the Spirit. We're reminded at the end of this passage that it is a spiritual fight that we are engaged in. It's not simply a physical one within this world, but it is that other world, the kingdom not of this world, that needs to be established against the powers of the evil one. The picture then has a great deal of depth, resonating with the culture of its time, and that teaches us how much we should be aware, ready to speak in the culture of our own age about the things that are timeless, to make those contacts with people who need to hear the message in today's language.